so important, and you're never going to get away from it, honestly. All of physiology is just trying to get our body to get back to a set point, okay? Homeostasis is the process of trying to find that equilibrium. By unchanging, we mean an relatively unchanging set point, okay? Homeostasis is the process of maintaining a relatively stable internal environment regardless of the external conditions. So despite whatever's happening around you, the internal environment is still hanging on, doing what it needs to do. It allows changes within some limits, but for a lot of it, there is a range that is considered normal, okay? Examples of that, great example of that is body temperature. If I were to ask you what the average human body temperature is, would anybody be able to tell me that? Yeah, 98.6. That is the average human body temperature. 98.6 what? Degrees Fahrenheit. That's important. Making sure that your unit is on point is important, okay? Because 98.6, we could have 98.6 degrees Celsius, but that's hot as heck. I have to check myself there. That's hot as heck, right? Very different from 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the average human temperature. But if I went around and I took every single one of your temperatures, would it be 98.6 every single time? No, not necessarily. So there is a set point for each individual that sits within a normal range. Actually, recent studies have shown that this temperature is actually a little bit lower now. We tend to sit at around 97.4 on average, but humans sit between a range of, I say, 97.0 to 99.0. And that's anywhere in there is a normal range for a human being to be in. Okay? Right? So, autoregulation is an automatic response in the cell, tissue, or an organ to some type of environmental change. Okay? An example of that could be like your skin cells, not skin cells, maybe your sweat glands when it's hot outside. Your sweat glands are going to dilate and start releasing liquid to help try to cool you down, right? That is an automatic response set from the effector. Nope, let me back up. Set from the stimuli, which is that hot weather, to the eventual result being your body cooling down, okay? Extrinsic regulation, something controlled by the nervous or endocrine system, that would be something like blood sugar, right? Your blood sugar is high. The receptors in your brain that say, hey, this is high, the chemoreceptors in your hypothalamus and in your medulla oblongata will say, hey, this is not quite right. Send hormones to your pancreas to say, hey, I need you to start releasing insulin so that we can drop our overall blood sugar. Okay? That's a little bit more of an extrinsic regulative process. Bit last time we spoke, but, and it's not going to let me erase this, all homeostatic feedback loops have these same steps. There's a stimulus, a sensor, an integrator, an effector, a response, and a result. It is super, super important that you guys memorize all of these steps. This will come up time and time and time again. Easy way to kind of group them, SSI, ERR. Society, you get a stimulus. That stimulus is whatever is changing the set point. The sensor is the guy that says, hey, something's not right here. I'm telling you that there is something going on. The integrator is usually going to be your hypothalamus or your medulla oblongata, somewhere in your brain that processes that information and compares it to the internal set point. Okay. The effector is usually a tissue, an organ, something that can do something about the necessary changes. Okay. The response is whatever it is that happens by the effector, and then result is usually the opposite of whatever the stimulus was. That was very broad, that was very vague. We're going to go through it in a little bit more detail. Was that your question? Response is going to be whatever the effector tells it to do, tells the body to do. So this is a little bit more verbal of what I was saying earlier. The stimulus is just anything that causes deviation from the set point. And that set point is an internal set thing. Your receptors are constantly taking measurements, taking little samples of what it is that is going on around you so that it can know whether or not we are within the normal range for our own bodies. Okay. So the stimulus is any type of deviation from the set point. In the temperature example, we'll go with 98.6 as the set point. So anything that is not 98.6 is a deviation from the set point. Okay. We call this error, but when you guys see this error, I want you guys to think physiological error. Not so much what went wrong with the experiment, more so this is not the set point. Okay. Anything that is not the set point is in error. Does that make sense? So give me an example of a temperature that is in error. So deviation from the set point, that's measured by the sensor. The sensor is going to be any kind of receptor. In this case, because we're talking temperature, because we're talking temperature, the sensor is going to be the thermoreceptors in your skin. And some that are in your hypothalamus. Okay. That sensor is going to say, hey, I need to send this information that something is not within the right range, that I'm receiving signals that my temperature is sitting at 97.2. I need to send this to the integrator. The integrator is going to be somewhere in your brain. That integrator is going to compare the signal coming in from the sensor to the intrinsic set point. Okay? That integrator will say, okay, I get it. This is not where it's supposed to be. And then we'll send signals to the effectors. The effectors in this case are going to be your blood vessels. Your blood vessels, your erector pili muscles, anything like that. They're going to say, hey, blood vessels, you are dumping off way too much heat. I need you to start constricting so that we stop losing so much heat. Okay? Your blood vessels will constrict, your erector pili muscles will start to activate, and those muscles will start to generate heat. In that heat generation, your body temperature will hopefully start to rise. That is the response. Temp rises. And as a result, you are no longer cold. Your body temperature goes back to set point. Okay? In this specific feedback loop, we are looking at a negative feedback loop. Okay? I mentioned briefly that there are two types of feedback loops. A negative feedback loop, like I was kind of saying, will usually be the result will be opposite of the stimuli. Most of the homeostatic loops that we look at in this class are going to be negative feedback loops. The exceptions are going to be blood clotting, and labor. Those are probably the only two real big positive feedback loops that we will look at. And with a positive feedback loop, you get more of the stimulus occurring. So, for example, with blood clotting, once you start clotting blood, the different blood factors that start activating, they will continue to hyperactivate until the clot is clotted. But blood clots are dangerous. So once they start, they just don't stop. Okay. Cool. So, negative feedback system, those are pretty common. They will usually reverse the change that you found from the stimulus, results in some fluctuation about the set point. Some examples that we had talked about. You guys give me some examples. Temperature, blood sugar. What else? I'll go blood pressure. Volume, pressure, kind of interchangeable. Not really interchangeable. Don't quote me on that. Heart rate, definitely. All of these, yeah. You know, it could be. It could be. It could be that your chemoreceptors in your stomach have said, hey, there's something that we don't like in here. There's something that is not agreeing with our system. I need you to get it out, and I don't know how you're going to do it, but it needs to come out of this body right now, right? Your chemoreceptors will send that information to the integrators in your brain, your medulla, your hypothalamus, and say, hey, this is poison. We got to get it out of here right now. You'll throw up about it. It'll tell your stomach, your esophagus to say, hey, I'm going to need you guys to start contracting because this needs to get out of me now. You'll throw up. Result, your acid-base balance will regulate. pH will regulate. Okay? So yeah, throwing up very well could be a negative feedback system. Okay? Positive, those changes are amplified. Again, with blood clotting, you start clotting, you're going to continue clotting. With giving birth, you start releasing oxytocin and you continue releasing that oxytocin until that baby pops out. Okay? The set point is the ideal normal value of a variable. Menstruation, that one's not really a feedback loop. That one is a hormonal fluctuation. So set point, any idea outside or blah blah blah, normal value. Error is anything that is within normal values but is not the set point. All we've done is talk about this example of negative feedback loops. So I will have you guys run this example. You tell me, yo, you know what? It's there. It's double written. Yeah. Because you guys did all that work yourselves. Good job. All right. So what is a disturbance of homeostasis? All of our physiological systems will work to restore balance, that is, trying to get to homeostasis in any way, shape, or form. A disturbance is failure to maintain that homeostatic balance that results in disease or death. Okay? Can you give me an example of a disturbance for body temperature? Yeah, hypothermia. You fall into a frozen lake, you are losing heat to the water faster than you can generate heat. If you cannot generate heat fast enough to survive in that frozen lake, your overall temperature will drop until your body becomes unresponsive. you will lose consciousness and then probably kick the bucket unless someone happens to save you in time. So never go to a frozen lake alone. Okay? So yeah, hypothermia. Another one on the opposite end of the spectrum, heat stroke. If you go outside and you are hiking in 117-degree weather for some crazy person reason, and you forgot your water bottle because, it was just supposed to be a quick little hike, as you are getting all your good steps in, right? You are going to be losing water. Yeah.
Also, can bacterial infection cause
Yeah. To an extent. So like something like meningitis or something like that is causing some kind of fever. And if we can't get rid of the infection and your body is trying to fight the infection as best as it can, it's going to raise your temperature because the body doesn't, or the bacteria don't like a temperature above XYZ. That's why we get fevers in the first place, is to try to kill off that bacteria. If the bacteria is not dying, your body's going to be like, okay, let's raise the temperature some more until it has raised the temperature to a point where it's like, oh wait, this is too hot for me now too. What do I do? How do I stop it? But by this point, all of these processes that should have stopped this temperature rising are no longer working. So yeah, that could definitely be one of them. Okay. So a disturbance in homeostasis is anything that will result in disease or death. In blood glucose regulation. So blood glucose regulation doesn't necessarily involve the brain. This one will kind of go straight in through the chemoreceptors in your pancreas. Your blood glucose, the normal range for a human, and this is, I believe, non-fasting, is between 70 and 110 milligrams per deciliter. For fasting, it is 60 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. You will need to know these ranges. You will need to know optimal ranges for human beings for most of the things that we talk about. So a normal adult human being's resting heart rate should be between anywhere between 60 and 100 beats per minute. Respiratory rate, blood pressure, all of that stuff. So for blood glucose, anywhere between 70 and 110 milligrams per deciliter is non-fasting. Yep. Glucose is going to do its best to slide itself into your cells so that it can go through the process and make a bunch of ATP, right? In that process, we need that glucose to power your brain, right? Your brain runs on glucose. Since your brain runs on glucose and we need all of that sugar, your pancreas releases these, or has these little islands. I don't know if you guys remember these from anatomy, these islets of Langerhans that have those alpha and beta cells. That's not beta. That's kind of beta. Okay. Alpha and beta cells. Those alpha and beta cells monitor kind of the amounts of sugar in the blood, and then they will say, hey, I need you, pancreas, to start releasing insulin. Because our, say, blood sugar is way too high. I need you to start releasing insulin so that you can shuttle this glucose into the cells so that we can use it to make energy. Okay? Can anyone name a disturbance of blood glucose? Diabetes. In diabetes, your insulin is either A, not being produced, or B, is no longer effective at shuttling that glucose into your cells. Okay? There it is. Is this a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop? Yeah, it's negative. Okay? Your stimulus is that high blood glucose at around 120. For some people, And again, set point for each individual might be a little bit different, okay? The beta cells of your islets of Langerhans are your sensors, okay? The integrators, in this case, are going to be your body cells, your adipose tissue, your liver, and your skeletal muscle. All of this insulin in the blood is going to pull out stored, nope, I lied. All of this insulin in the blood is going to push in glucose in its stored form, called glycogen, into these body cells, your adipose tissue, all of that stuff. That's going to happen in here. I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Okay. Shove it in there and save it for later in the form of glycogen. Okay. Integrators. This is low-key kind of effectors. Response would be this as well, kind of shoving that glucose in. And then the result is that reduced blood sugar. Does that make sense? Okay. In diabetes mellitus, this doesn't happen. Something is wrong with the insulin. It's either not being produced properly or it is insufficient in being able to move glucose around. Pictures for the words that I just said. Pancreas will make insulin. Insulin does its thing, or it doesn't. It either doesn't work, that's type 2. It is no longer sensitive to finding glucose and moving it into the cells accurately, or type 1, in which it is not produced properly. Okay. A disturbance is anything that will prevent that homeostatic feedback loop from establishing homeostasis. Is this system here a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop? How do you know? Other than the fact that it says positive right there on, no. Don't read. Yeah. This was not a great example because this says it right here. But essentially, you get a blood vessel injury. That blood clotting starts. As it proceeds, you get a bunch of chemicals that are released. Those chemicals that are released start more blood clotting processes. Oh, lordy. And more blood clotting processes and more blood clotting processes. There's actually a blood clotting cascade. Blood clot cascade of different factors. There's like factor 9, factor 7, a whole bunch of other stuff that leads to those chemicals that are being released that makes more clotting and more clotting and more clotting until eventually clotting is completed. And then eventually that cascade will stop. And we'll get there when we talk about blood. Okay?